Yeah, so good day, everyone. Good evening, depending where you are. Great to have you here. First of all, I'd just like to welcome you to BlockDAG's first technical presentation. By way of introduction, I'm Anthony Turner, CEO of BlockDAG. I have the privilege of introducing my colleague, Dr Maurice Herlihy, who's going to be speaking this evening. Excuse my voice, I'm battling a bit with a cold, so I'm glad to be handing over to him in a moment. Just to introduce Maurice, so he's received an AB in mathematics from Harvard University and also a PhD in computer science from MIT. He served on the faculty of Carnegie Mellon University and also the staff of DEC Cambridge Research Labs. And he's currently a professor of computer science at Brown University. So we're all very aware of the limitations of traditional blockchains. Like Bitcoin, especially when it comes to transaction speed and finality. So Dr. Herlihy will be discussing these limitations and how the directed acyclic graph, or DAG, as we call it in BlockDAG, solves for these limitations. So he'll be talking more around from an academic perspective in terms of the algorithms and methods that are used. He's not going to go into how we've implemented it. So we will open up for questions after he's finished. He's probably going to be about 30 to 40 minutes. So happy to take questions afterwards, but obviously if you can keep it on topic in terms of the academic side as opposed to implementation. That's all from me. I'm going to hand over to Maurice now. So Maurice, yeah, take it away.
Well, thank you, Anthony. Try to miss these slides to move here. Here we are. Yes, so as Anthony said, I'm going to be talking about the algorithm at the heart of BlockDAG. This is going to be an academic talk in the sense that I'm going to talk about how the algorithm works and just as importantly, what it is that this algorithm accomplishes, why we think it's such a great idea. I'm going to explain this in fairly elementary terms because I want this talk to be accessible to everyone. So I apologize in advance to all of you algorithm mavens out there who may not need things expressed at quite this level. I want to emphasize that I'm not going to be talking about the BlockDAG implementation because that would be a whole another talk with a whole different flavor. I'm going to stick to the kind of engine room technical aspects of the algorithm. Finally, what I'm talking about here is not my research work. The paper that I show in the background of the slide has all of the details, has all of the proofs, it has all of the detailed instructions. And if anything I say here seems interesting to you, I encourage you to go and consult this paper, which is very clear and well written. So let's begin at the beginning. So a blockchain, there's a lot of mystification about blockchains and what blockchains are and what they do. But really a blockchain is just a distributed ledger. A ledger is something that was invented during the Italian Renaissance and is credited with the success of Medici banks and merchants and much of the economic life of Western Europe starting from the Renaissance. At the heart, though, it's an append-only list of events. Now, these events, we think of them as financial events, but they could actually be anything. A database log is really a kind of a ledger. The list of people who visit a building is also a kind of ledger. But the idea is that you can only append things to the ledger. If you make a mistake, you can append a compensating entry saying, I made a mistake, but you cannot go back and erase things, you cannot go back and reorder things, you cannot go back and modify things. And the important thing in our context is that all the parties can agree on the content of the ledger. The parties might not trust one another, but there is no ambiguity about the state of the ledger. And of course, most importantly, the ledger has to be tamper-proof. As I said, it is impossible to go back and fiddle with it. Now, a blockchain is just a popular way to implement a ledger. So almost literally, a blockchain is a chain of blocks, and a block is a chain of transactions. Although there are, of course, many levels of detail here and lots of technical complications, but for our purposes, none of this is all that important. Now, in all the pictures that I'm showing you, remember that arrows go backwards in time, so that if one block points to another, the source of the arrow happened later than the target of the arrow. Now, there's lots of other machinery here, including there's hashes all over the place to detect tampering and so on. Again, none of this is really germane to the topic that I want to talk about. Now, the question is, who gets to decide what goes on the ledger? In proof of work, and indeed in other related blockchain organizations, we have a collection of miners. The miners are the ones who decide. Each of the miners has a copy of the blockchain, and in proof of work, well, there's lots of ways to explain what proof of work is, but here I'm going to pick a particularly simple and abstract model that works perfectly well for what we're trying to do. Think of it as miners keep buying lottery tickets, and if you win the lottery, then you get to choose the next block and you get a reward. If you lose the lottery, then you don't get anything, and so you probably want to go and buy another ticket. Now, importantly, the winner only gets a reward, they only get paid if the other miners accept that block. So this gives you the incentive to behave, because if you put a block, if you approve a block that is clearly bogus, that is clearly broken, then the other miners won't accept it, and you will never get paid. So we have a collection of miners, and the miners keep buying lottery tickets in the hope of being able to put a new block onto the chain. Every now and then, one of them wins. And then the winner of the lottery, the rule says, gets to append a new block. Now, it's important to realize that this is a distributed system, and the miners are separated in space, and there's a network delay communication, so that when a miner wins the lottery and adds a new block, at the start, only that miner knows about the block. And so then it will take some time for that block to propagate to other miners, and this is important. Now, question is, what can go wrong? Well, what can go wrong is that lottery tickets are independent of each other. If I buy a ticket and you buy a ticket, we can both win, and we can both win at about the same time. So a problem arises if multiple miners win the lottery at about the same time. When this happens, each one of them adds a new block to the chain. And now we have a problem, because now we have the blue miner and the green miner have different ideas about what the chain should be. And this is, if you look at this at a more abstract level, this is a fork in the chain. Now, this is a problem because the blockchain is supposed to be a chain, not a tree. Remember, the ledger is just a list of events. It's not a tree of events. And we don't have any particular way of making sense out of a forked blockchain, at least at the start. Now, the way that most proof of work protocols, Bitcoin and so on, handle it is that later miners can choose which block to build on, and eventually the chain following through one block will be much longer than the chain the other block, and everyone will agree to work on the block with the most votes. This is usually referred to as the heaviest block. The other block, the one that becomes neglected, is called an orphan. Now, orphans are expensive because they mean wasted work and slower finality. If you're a miner and you come to a block and you win the lottery and you want to append a block, you have to decide which one to append to. If you pick the wrong one, then you won't end up getting paid. Any transactions you pick will not become finalized. the whole thing slows down. So because forking is expensive, the Bitcoin protocol slows itself down. Proof of work, at least traditional proof of work, has an inherent limit on the number of blocks it will produce per unit of time, which it controls by setting the difficulty of the hashing problem. And so these Bitcoin is slow not because we can't make it run fast enough, but because inherently it can't run any faster than it does. The trade-off here is if you make it too easy to produce blocks, if you produce blocks at a high rate, then you get frequent forks. Lots of orphans and confusion and ambiguity about what the state of the blockchain is. And this is an inherent scalability limit that has nothing to do with the engineering quality of the infrastructure. It has to do with the logical nature of the consensus protocol itself. And so what the world needs is a proof of work protocol that does not have an inherent self-limit. Of course, any protocol is going to have some limits based on computation time, on communication time, and so on. But these are, resource limits, engineering limits. We want to avoid a protocol that deliberately tries to limit itself. So let's do a thought experiment. Let's run a proof of work protocol and let's crank up the rate. So let's dial up the block rate as high as we can stand it and see what happens. So we're producing blocks faster than we can propagate them. So we end up with a tree structure that looks somewhat like this, where there are many blocks, which is good because that means a high throughput, lots of transactions are happening. But many of these blocks do not know about the other blocks, which is bad for coherence and security and so on. So we've improved in one area, but gotten much worse in the other area. So, but let's assume that we want to embrace this and try to run with it. So let's say, since what we're worried about is information propagation, let's say that each block, when it's created, has a link to all the predecessors it knows about. So this is a way to propagate as much information as possible. So each block references all of their known predecessors instead of selecting a single predecessor. So now the result is no longer a tree structure, it's a directed acyclic graph, also called the DAG, and this is the DAG in BlockDAG. Should mention directed means that the links go backwards in time, they have a direction. Acyclic means that there's no time travel. You can't, there are no loops in the DAG. So let's say that a block is honest if it's produced by an honest miner. So remember, the miner rules are that when you create a block, you point to all the blocks you know about, or at least you point to the most recent blocks that you know about, the so-called tips of the DAG, and you broadcast your block as quickly as you can. So we'll say a block is honest if it's produced by an honest miner. Now, under what circumstances does one honest block not know about another honest block? Well, that can only happen if they're created at about the same time. So here, the blue block and the pink block don't know about each other because they were simultaneously created at opposite ends of the network by honest miners. Now, if you think about this for a second, if we know the block propagation delay, then we can put a limit on the number of blocks likely to be unconnected to an honest block. And we'll call that number K. Of course, attackers can create blocks that have lots and lots of blocks they don't know about. But remember, the attackers have less than half the computational power of the lottery tickets. So here, for example, there are most K blocks unknown to the honest blue blocks, and we're going to take advantage of that K. Now, different values of K will give you different kinds of graphs. So K is 0, then we end up with a traditional blockchain. as everything is in a single linear order. Every block knows about all of its predecessors, and every successor knows about that block. If we relax things a little and we take a higher k, then we end up with a real DAG. And as you can see, the width of the DAG is basically k. Now, what I haven't told you is how do we deal with conflicting transactions. So if the problem is that one transaction doesn't know about another, then it's possible that honest miners can produce conflicting transactions. So here, Alice is trying to pull off a double spending attack. So she goes to the blue miner and says, I'd like to pay Bob. And then she goes to the red miner and says, I'd like to pay that same coin to Carol. Now, this is going to work so far because neither of these blocks can see the other one, so no one is aware that there's a double spending going on. But crime in the end, of course, doesn't pay, because what happens is as information propagates, the miners and other parties that want to validate the blockchain will see more and more of the chain. They will impose an order, a total order, on the blocks that they see. Everyone will eventually agree on that order, and then they will say, okay, so I see that Alice paid Bob before she tried to pay Carol, so the earlier transaction takes effect, which is what you would do in a regular blockchain. So it takes slightly longer to detect these conflicts than it would if you had a linear blockchain. So a little bit of vocabulary. Since what we really care about is who knows what about whom and when, let's say that given a block, think of all the blocks that our favorite block knows about. This is called the pass cone. A cone is a reference to physics. So our block points to all of the blue blocks. Those constitute the pass cone of the block. Similarly, all of the blocks that point to our block constitute the future cone. So these are in some sense, all the blocks that are born knowing about each other. All of the other blocks that our block doesn't know about are called the anti-cone. And this is, the point of this protocol is to figure out how to arrange the block and its anti-cone. So the Phantom protocol, which is the first protocol that we're going to look at for organizing this, the goal is to recognize the honest blocks and to discard or at least penalize the rest. So we want to recognize which blocks are honest, and we want to discount the blocks that we suspect are not honest. The principal insight is that honest blocks are going to be well connected. Remember, an honest miner will link a block to all of the tips that it knows about. It will broadcast as soon as it can and as energetically as it can. So let's say that an honest block is created at time t, and we have a network delay of big D. So it takes time big D for news of a block to traverse across all the miners. So the pass cone of a block are all the blocks created before t minus d. So if an honest block was created before t minus d, then our block will have learned about it, because there's been enough time to transmit news of that block to the miner who creates this block. The future cone are all the blocks that are created after t plus d for the same reason, so that when our honest block is created, it's broadcast to everyone. Everyone receives that broadcast in time d. Everyone links to it directly or indirectly, and then it falls into the future. So that says that the anti-cone is at most k blocks, where k is a function of a network delay and the number of miners. So here is how this is the key concept to the Phantom protocol. We'll say a K cluster, shown here in blue, is every blue block is connected to all but K blue blocks. So this is a cluster of densely connected blocks. don't all know about one another, but they mostly know about one another. Now, it turns out that the honest blocks most likely, with very high probability, form a K-cluster. Now, the dishonest blocks, dishonest miners can conspire with one another also to create a K-cluster. But remember, they have less than half of the computing power, so any dishonest K-cluster is going to be smaller than the largest honest K-cluster. So now we're ready to present the Phantom algorithm. Step one of the Phantom algorithm is you find the largest K-cluster. Once you've found the largest K-cluster, then we order it. So we put it in an order where we respect the existing DAG order, so that if block number one knows about block number two, then block number one will happen later than block number two. Blocks that don't know each other are ordered. We break ties by hashing the blocks or something like that. So now we have an emerging linear order on the blocks. Then we walk down the chain and we check for invalid transactions. So here, our friend Alice is still trying to double spend. So this time she plays Carol first and then plays Bob. And because once these are ordered in a stable, unchanging order, then everyone will agree that the first payment is valid, the second payment is invalid. Instead of throwing away the entire block the way you would do with something like a Bitcoin, we simply throw away the offending transaction because they could have been produced by honest miners. Now, there's a theorem that says that all of this works. I'm not going to try to prove that theorem here. I recommend you to read the paper if you're interested. But the theorem says that as long as an attacker has less than half of the computational power, then the largest K-cluster is going to be all honest for K that's suitable for your physical network. And that's the algorithm. The bad news, however, is that one step that I kind of glided over of finding the maximum K-cluster, that turns out to be NP-hard. Now, what does NP-hard mean? It means don't even try to do it. It means if you could come up with an efficient solution of an NP-hard problem, you could solve a lot of other problems. You become rich and famous, and it's probably not something that you want to put on your critical path. So we need a way to wiggle out of this. Now, remember that finding the largest K-cluster is the hard part, but we don't really need the largest K-cluster to stay in business. It's enough to pick a pretty large cluster. So it's usually the case with these things is that we can approximate the largest K-cluster pretty efficiently and pretty effectively, as long as we don't insist on making sure that we have the theoretically largest possible cluster. So that brings us to the notion of a K-uncle. This is going to be the grounds for a pragmatic approximation of finding the maximum K-cluster. Let's start out with a chain. So that's the blue blocks here form a linear chain. A K-uncle is a node that is connected to all but K of the elements of the chain. So the blue node marked zero uncle is a zero uncle because everything is connected to it. It's either connected or connected to by everyone in the chain. The pink is a one uncle because it misses one element of the chain. Orange is a two uncle because it misses two elements, and green is a three uncle. So the GhostDAG protocol, which is the actual protocol that would be deployed, you find the chain with the most K uncles. Find the chain of heaviest weight with the most. So in this way, we replace the NP-hard first step, which is finding the largest K cluster, with what's called the greedy approximation. So we start out with a kind of a seed, and then we build it up as far as we can. So we look at all the linear chains, find the one with the most K uncles, and construct a K cluster from that chain and its uncles together. Then we order those blocks and uncle chains in a DAG consistent way. So that is, we break ties for unrelated blocks by hashing them. And then we, as before, we walk through the chain and discard invalid transactions. Now, the second great theorem in this paper says that this also works. So if the attacker has less than half of the computational power, then almost all of the honest blocks are uncles of degree less than or equal to k of the heaviest chain. And almost no dishonest blocks are included here. So all of the miners will eventually agree on a stable order for all the blocks. They will all agree on which of the double spending transactions are valid and which ones aren't. And we end up with a working blockchain. So what this does is we now have a proof of work protocol that does not need to self-limit itself. Obviously, you can't turn the block production rate up to an infinite level because you need to stay within the speed of your network. But given that we want the speed of the actual hardware to limit the throughput of our network, not the protocol itself. So the protocol itself doesn't. It's a simple and efficient. There's an open source implementation. This was previously deployed in Caspa, which uses a GhostDAG protocol to support a UTXO system. And we're here because we have BlockDAG, which uses GhostDAG and supports both UTXO and, importantly, EVM as on top of that. Okay, so that's my talk, and I'm happy to open the floor to questions.
Thanks very much, Maurice. I think that was very well explained. I mean, it's a fairly complex topic. Everyone appreciated that you took us through very well. I don't think everyone expected learning about uncles, so that was a new terminology. If anyone's got questions, I'll open the floor to questions. Obviously, please keep it to the academic, theoretical side, not implementation side. But please, yeah, send through your questions, and Maurice will answer the ones that he can. Just give me a moment. Okay, you should be able to post questions. Okay, so we're getting a lot of positive feedback and appreciation for a good explanation. So, Maurice, I'm not sure. Are you happy to answer a question around how EVM integrates with that, or is that outside of the
I can give a very high level. So EVM is just a way of interpreting the state of a blockchain. The original Ethereum and all of the Ethereum add-ons use, the original one was proof of work, just like the one that we're using. Of course, they switched over to proof of stake, but it's still just a sequence of transactions. The transactions modify the state of the EVM, but you could take the Ethereum blockchain and replay everything and reconstruct an EVM at any point. So, you need the ability to, roll back and replay if you run into, orphans and forks and so on. But you need that anyway. There's nothing special about GhostDAG there. So it may sound a little odd, but in fact, it's no harder running EVM on GhostDAG than it is running EVM on any kind of consensus protocol.
Okay, thanks very much, Maurice. There's a question here. Could you explain how recursion ties into the greedy algorithm?
Well, it doesn't really. The fact that it's greedy is it starts out with this path, and it keeps adding new members until it runs out of uncles to add. So it isn't really recursion. The reason it isn't optimal is because there might be a different order that works better than the one you happen to choose, but any order is going to be pretty good. So there isn't really recursion going on. There's just more accretion.
Okay, thank you. How does the internet speed affect the protocols in the blockchain, if at all?
Well, if you had a very high network speed, then your K could be pretty low. But remember, K is the number of honest blocks that you don't know about because they were created at about the same time. So, for example, if you had infinite speed, then you'd have K equals 0 because everyone would know about everything. And in that case, you probably wouldn't need you would need a DAG. But of course, in real life, there's speed of light, there's network congestion, and so on. So the slower the network is, the larger the K you're going to need.
Okay. Just a question from myself. I mean, theoretically, if we pushed up K considerably, does that mean we get a far faster, more performant chain? And potentially, what are the limitations?
No, K has kind of a sweet spot. So if your K is much larger than the one that was dictated by your network speed, then you're leaving throughput on the table. So you could resolve conflicts faster and get faster finality and so on. So the optimal K is the one that most closely matches the speed of your actual network. You want to be conservative. You don't want to assume your network is faster than it actually is. But picking a really large K would be assuming that your network is slower than it is, which is not optimal either.
Okay. Another question, if a bad actor were to achieve above 50% hashing power temporarily, could this be detected and reversed after the attack?
It could certainly be detected after the attack. How you would reverse it is not a kind of a technical question, that's a governance question. So, you could certainly detect that there were transactions on the chain, accepted onto the chain that should not be there. What you do about them is a question of governance, not a question of algorithm
design. Okay. As the blocks are mined in parallel, wouldn't a bad actor just need 51% of the block hash power?
Everybody, not just BlockDAG, assumes that the bad guys don't have 51% of the hash power. Because if they do, then there's nothing you can do that can prevent them from reorganizing the chain.
Okay. Am I correct in saying, Maurice, just to add to that it's more of a probability, as in there's not sort of a cutover between 50.001 and 49.99? The probability of things going wrong becomes greater and greater, or the probability of someone having a successful attack.
Yes, all of the guarantees are probabilistic in nature. People kind of gloss over that, but all of this blockchain, they're very high probabilities. They may be longer than the age of the universe, but it's always the case that if suddenly all the bad guys suddenly keep solving the hash problems and all the good guys are failing to solve the hash problem, then the bad guys can do a lot of damage. The probability of that happening is so low that nobody worries
about that. Okay. How does K affect the security of the network?
I think if the K is too far, if your K is too large, then it will take you longer to resolve conflicts. So remember when we looked at the where Alice was trying to do the double spending, all the miners that see both of Alice's spending attempts will realize that the second one is bogus. And so if it takes you a long time to see both those things, then it will take you a long time to resolve it. So safety is not really compromised in this case, but the liveness, the finality might take longer under those circumstances.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering if this was going to come up. The question of quantum processes, how does that affect what we're doing here? I mean, is this attackable in terms of where things are going, and potentially when could that happen?
Well, that's an excellent question. It's kind of independent of the GhostDAG protocol. That has to do with if the proof of work is a hash function that is vulnerable to quantum attack, then you might have a long-term problem. But you could just as well pick a hash function that is believed to not be vulnerable to that. So this is something that's very deep in the proof of work or even the proof of stake protocol. It doesn't come into the protocol at this level. Okay.
And do you have a view on when that potentially could be in terms of a KCAC 256 or a SHA-256 type hashing algorithm?
So this is notoriously hard to predict. There are certainly people who scoff and say that quantum supremacy will never happen. At the same time, IBM recently announced a new quantum machine with something like 150 bits, which is not enough to threaten any existing blockchain, but still way more than you would have expected. So I think it would be prudent moving forward to make sure that your algorithms are quantum resistant. But there's no particular need to panic. I certainly don't expect anything within the next decade to be a serious threat.
Okay, so no need to panic just yet. Good to hear. Can you give us a sense for the differences between what BlockDAG is using and Casper?
So I think one of the biggest differences is figuring out how to run an EVM on top of all of this. Certainly, we'll have lots of internal fixes and improvements and so on, but I'm not going to get into that. That's off topic. But applying this algorithm to provide a functionality above and beyond what's happened before is, to me, the most exciting part of it.
Okay. Sorry, just looking through the questions. Some of the questions are off topic, so we're just looking for the more relevant questions. I think we've covered most of them. There's a couple of questions around comparisons with different coins. I think that's a bit off topic as well. So I think we've delved into everything. I think we've covered everything very well, and I'd just like to first of all start by thanking Maurice. I mean, I think you presented a difficult concept quite elegantly. I certainly appreciate it. I hope everyone now has a better understanding. We will make this video available. I think previously there might have been issues with finding the video, so available. It's obviously a good reference for people to be able to take a look back and replay some of the more tricky parts when it comes to uncles and aunts. And otherwise, I just want to thank everyone very much for joining us. I hope you found it useful and interesting. Thanks very much for myself and from Maurice as well, and from the rest of the team. Okay. Cheers, everyone. Goodbye. We're going to close off now.